easy to say that Al Capone was nothing more than a menace to society. A ruthless killer who unleashed a crime wave in Chicago that has never been duplicated and gave the city a reputation it still hasn't completely shaken off. But that wouldn't explain why movies and television shows continue to romance his image, or why there are people who still think of him as a folk hero. He came to Chicago from Brooklyn in 1924, following a mentor, and became one of the youngest crime bosses in history. He already had a scar on his left cheek from a knife fight that would label him Scarface the rest of his life. As he climbed the criminal ranks, he found he had a knack for running businesses. He seemed to be made of the same stuff as other corporate chairmen, except for one thing. His way of firing traitors or dealing with competitors came from a dark part of his soul that only murderers know. Loyalty earned people safety from Capone. Those who risked being his enemy never had a chance. His killings were cold and ruthless. In his 7 years as Chicago's mob boss, he was responsible for more than 300 gangland murders. But Capone didn't see himself as a criminal. He thought he was smart and charismatic enough to be popular. People treated him like a celebrity. He didn't act like a murderer. If it weren't for the St. Valentine's Day massacre, things might have gone on that way in Chicago for a long time. But once it had become clear that Capone was behind the brutal mass murder, the city he thought was his turned on him. By the end of 1924, the Secret Six, the Chicago businessmen turned civic vigilantes, were making progress in their plan to get rid of Al Capone. The members each had their reasons for wanting Capone out of Chicago. Frank Lesh, a devout Christian and survivor of the Great Chicago Fire, saw it as a public service. George Paddock, who had become a U.S. congressman, worried about the effect on the poor. Robert Isham Randolph had commanded troops in World War I and saw this as a different kind of war. Collectively, their motives were simple. They didn't think the city was safe for decent citizens with Capone and his gang around. Once they decided to take action, things had quickly fallen into place. They secretly began a campaign to get other businessmen to contribute to their fund. They were meeting regularly with the government agents the president had sent to Chicago. Out in the open, Elliot Ness and his untouchables were building a prohibition violation case, while the intelligence agents worked undercover, risking their lives for evidence of something that at face value seemed almost comical: income tax evasion. Al Capone was found guilty of income tax evasion for the years 1925, 26, and 27. And for failing to file returns in 1928 and 29. He was sentenced to 11 years in prison and fined $80,000. It was the most severe sentence ever given in an income tax evasion case. Income tax evasion might have seemed a flimsy ending for one of the most brutal gangsters of all time, but it got the job done. On October 24th, 1931, Al Capone's reign over Chicago came to an end. The man who had held the city in his grip for almost a decade was finally going to prison. The Chicago newspapers applauded the end of the Capone era. When interviewed about the trial, Capone gave one last salute. Not to the U.S. Treasury agents history would name as his archenemy, Elliot Ness and the Untouchables, but to the businessmen of Chicago he respected, the Secret Six.